Playoff season is here, and the only thing better than game day predictions are the foods that come with them. Introducing Tums Fantasy Foodball Pool, brought to you by Tums, America's #1 antacid brand, and DraftKings. Each week leading up to the big game, turn football into foodball by building your best game day plate for a shot at winning a share of $40,000 in cash prizes. Inspired by game day bites and tailgate treats, join the Tums foodball action during this playoff season's most heartburn-inducing time. Visit DraftKings.com/foodball between January 6th and February 9th to enter for free and select your game day plate before the start of each playoff round. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at DraftKings.com/TumsFoodball. When you feel the heat of the game, don't let heartburn keep you on the sidelines. Try Tums Chewy Bites with a tasty outer shell and soft center for fast relief of heartburn, acid indigestion, and upset stomach. Check out Tums Gummy Bites, featuring a soft and easy-to-chew format for fast relief of occasional heartburn, acid indigestion, sour stomach, and upset stomach. Both available at Amazon, Target, and other major retailers nationwide. And for more heartburn relief fun, be sure to follow Tums at Tums Official on Instagram and TikTok.
It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. Most of you know that. Now I got the broadcasting gigs. I'll be on the sideline Sunday for radio, for Eagles and the Commanders, NFC Championship. Always fun to interview the winning quarterback, winning head coach right after they get off that podium, after they get the conference championship trophy. Always a thrill, no matter how many times I've done it. Really cool and unique. I also have a bunch of podcasts. So Ross Tucker Football Podcast is daily, 26 minutes or less, give you everything you need to know about the NFL. A lot of people listen or watch youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, the Even Money Betting Podcast. This is the Fantasy Feast Show, where we talk about fantasy football, and in particular, this time of year, it's a lot of DFS talk, and it's a lot of prop betting talk, which is why we are putting this feed this week, this show this week, on the Even Money feed and vice versa. A lot of overlap for bettors and those of you that like to play DFS on these two shows. So making sure you guys get a chance to hear and listen to both. The star of this one is John Daigle. I'm a huge fan. He's like a Renaissance man, really interesting, cool dude who also is fantastic when it comes to having information about the NFL. You can check him out at NotJDaigle on social media or EstablishTheRun.com. If you go there for all their awesome content, a lot of you are probably familiar with Evan Silva, Adam Levitan. Use the code FEAST to get the discount. John, it's that time of year, man. There's only 3 games left. There's only 2 games on Sunday. I guess let's just start with an overview before we dive into these games. What are these games about? Whether it's DFS or prop betting, or, you know, when you think about these games, when people on your site are asking about these games, what's the primary focus or impetus for people that like to make their games a little bit more interesting?
From a 2-game standpoint, first of all, I think we have 4 fun teams, and that they are truly renewed rivalries. The best rivalry in all of football, in my opinion, Bills-Chiefs, that we wait for in the AFC Championship round every single year. And then what really is becoming the Eagles-Cowboys of the 2020s, which is Commanders-Eagles now, since the Cowboys have pretty much fallen to irrelevancy. So excited to get both of these matchups this weekend. And in terms of what to look for DFS and what we're trying to do here, because that's why I'm on here, not only to talk about the games overall and preview them with you, but also discuss some prop bets along the way to talk about how to approach DFS. Really, in a 2-game slate is all about uniqueness. And so this is why the game of DFS is hard, despite the fact that we at ETR give you the projections, the collective ownership, right? The percentage of amount, the players that are rostered in tournaments. really why DFS is so hard, because you have to break your brain and understand that because you're going for uniqueness to the top of tournaments, you are making minus EV decisions. Like, you're actually making worse decisions for better odds, if you can comprehend that sentence. And so, for instance, we're going to talk about what I believe are some matchup advantages, or how the Commanders could play against the Eagles. And this is just one example. But because of that, I may lean into the volatile scenario and say, okay, if the Commanders were to do this, then I'll play the Eagles this way. And I'm also doing that because less of the field is trying to play the Eagles offense that way. Like, if the Commanders run less man coverage, for instance, we know, as we've talked about not just last week, but throughout the regular season, that Devonta Smith is the one who has been much better against zone than A.J. Brown. And so if the field is going to play more A.J. Brown, again, I want the edge just in case that situation were to fail. And I ask myself, how do I put myself in position to win if that majority situation were to fail? And so that's how I'm coming into this DFS situation with the 2-game slate. It's very, very tough, especially with these 4 offenses where the target trees are really hard to hone down. The Bills especially. We're about to preview the Bills Chiefs, and I'll talk about some of the receivers, but you really genuinely cannot pinpoint who Josh Allen is going to favor outside of Khalil Shakir. So it is tougher, but again, that also means there's volatility there, and so we should be taking shots and chances as opposed to chasing what the rest of our opponents are going to do.
So you said so many good things there. 2 things that jump out to me, right? Before I forget, number 1, I tweeted this at Ross Tucker NFL, and we, by the way, are at Ross Tucker Pod. I don't think I mentioned that. But I tweeted this on, I guess you don't say tweet anymore. I posted this on X on
it's all
Sunday.
the same. It's okay.
Is there a more underrated, maybe underappreciated nationally or among fans receiver than Khalil Shakir? I mean, there are some efficiency numbers for him that are off the charts in terms of yards per target the last couple years, yards per catch, what he does after the catch. But I feel like, we obviously know about him, and you know about him, and we've been talking about him for a couple years. But if I asked my friends, I don't think they know who Khalil Shakir is. You know what I mean? Like, they know Amari Cooper way more than they know Khalil Shakir, right? Like, and I think he might be like the most, maybe under the radar is the right way to describe it. Are you with me on that?
I agree with you, and it's how they use Shakir, because he's also not necessarily a touchdown machine. That's how the public usually know guys like him. He's more of a possession receiver who, to your point, yes, otherworldly stats. He's used differently. They use him closer to the line of scrimmage, which is also why his catch rate is so high. Now, you still have to catch all those targets, so he has amazing hands. Yes, he was a great prospect as well. He just couldn't earn his way into 3 wide sets because they had, for whatever it's worth, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, and basically he was being blocked because he could only play in the slot. At least that's what they pigeonholed him. Sean McDermott did initially to begin his career. He's played more around the formation this year, but yes, their primary slot receiver, and he's the one where Josh Allen continues to lean on. We saw even like the couple of blow-up games where the Bills had back-to-back indoor contests against the Lions and Rams. Actually, Khalil Shakir was in the winning Millie Maker lineup. The Millie Maker, for those that don't know, on DraftKings, first place in a very, very, very large field tournament, which is basically a lottery. But first place does get $1 million. Khalil Shakir was in that $1 million winning lineup because, again, he is Josh Allen's preferred and favorited receiver. That was his first of only 2 games to go over 100 yards all year. So we'll talk about Shakir in this matchup too. But yes, to your point, he is a very, very good player who more people should know about.
Funny too, because when I posted that, half the response from Bills fans was like, shh, yes, and we like it that way. They like that he's under the radar or underappreciated. Evidently, they like to drink Labatt Blue Lights with their friends and family, live life to the power of we, and they like to keep their receivers a secret. Always enjoy responsibly. It really is delicious beer. My favorite light beer by far, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. The other thing I was going to say is, you describe it interestingly, John, because that's really the deal, right? Is we want you want to get guys that are less likely to have big games but that we think are the most likely out of the least likely, basically. If you just put all the stars in your lineup, you have no chance.
Right.
Like Saquon and those guys. But if you put Kenny Gainwell and maybe Hurts, maybe do a Kenny Gainwell Hurts stack, because I don't think many people are going to put Hurts in their lineup with the banged up knee and the way he's been playing. But maybe he comes out and plays awesome, and that's how you win.
He wasn't playing well, at least under pressure, as we previewed last week, headed into that games against the Rams. And then the equalizer was a career-high 44-yard touchdown run. So, yes, those things can happen. Again, you have to step back, and it's hard to wrap your head around that. I know, because we always want to put ourselves in the best situation, even like on the surface, right when you directly look at it. But again, that is really not how you play DFS. We're trying to make not the worst decisions, but more educated decisions based on what the field is not doing and taking on the volatility for bigger wins.
All right, let's start with the NFC Championship game. It is the Eagles and the Commanders. We can get into we'll just start with your thoughts, John. I might ping a couple more off of you looking at some of the prop yardage bets on DraftKings, but just start with your awesome breakdown and information like you always do.
And I have numbers or notes on every single player since it's 2 games now. So yes, if you want to throw some names at me afterwards, we can talk about them.
Nice.
But as an overview from this game, it is fun that we've already seen these teams play twice. Jalen Hurts, of course, only makes it through 1 contest due to a concussion, but in the first game these two teams played, only 12-10 in the fourth quarter until the Eagles rattled off 20 points. And then in the second game, Eagles leading 27-14, and only then did Washington storm back. That's the one that Jaden Daniels had 5 touchdowns in the game-winning last-second throw, because Washington scored 22 points in the fourth quarter. And it's really about what their offense has become and what their defense is doing when I view this game the third time around. For instance, throughout the playoffs, Washington now, as we've seen, being very aggressive, including against Detroit, and they have gone 6 of 9 on 4th down during the postseason. Speaking of volatility, that's running hot at the right time. However, they are, in my mind, I've been comping them to the Saints Super Bowl winning team because their defense, while still allowing massive chunk plays, they've allowed 7.1 yards per play through 2 playoff games. Not great, but they are an attacking defense. That's how Sean Payton won the Super Bowl, was with an attacking defense that creates turnovers, and that's what's Washington doing as well. For me, I step back and I say, okay, really what this is how can they possibly stop Saquon Barkley the third time around? Because in those first 2 games, of course, Saquon Barkley, 348 yards from scrimmage and a combined 4 touchdowns. Also, remember, he's going for, although he did not get that Week 18 regular season record set by Eric Dickerson since he sat out the season finale, he is just 148 yards shy of the most rushing yards ever for the regular and postseason combined. So he is chasing not only a record here, but more importantly, a Super Bowl appearance. And in their 2 playoff games, Washington, unfortunately, has allowed 5.4 yards per carry and, get this, 2.6 yards before contact per rush. So that means that opposing running backs in the playoffs so far against Washington have gained 2.6 yards before they're touched by Washington's defense at all. And now you have these big hog mollies from Philadelphia who have already had ease creating separation and gaps for Barkley, coming in to create even more room. So you have to think, regardless of what the field is doing, right? We talked about trying to get to the top of DFS lineups and being unique. The matchup is still far too good for Saquon Barkley, where I suck it up and I say, even if 80% of our opponents are going to roster him in DFS, I'm still going to play him and then just get unique elsewhere in some of my other slots because the matchup is so good. I will say, the way they created turnovers against Jared Goff was crushing the pocket, as we talked about, and forcing him under pressure. And Hurts was on the field this year against Washington, and the first 2 matchups, he did go 2 for 8 for only 3.4 yards per attempt under pressure. Also, as you mentioned earlier in the show, suffered that knee injury at the end of the game, so we don't quite know his health. So to me, it does come down to, can Washington Dan Quinn get there? Can they limit him? And then if so, is he available to run like he did against the Rams? Since really through the air last week, 15 to 20, he was efficient, but there were no explosive plays. And that's my concern here as well. For the other side of the ball, quickly for Jayden Daniels, because that's what the offense has become. The first two matchups against this Eagles defense that have allowed a league low 6.1 yards per attempt, the only defense allowing less than 6 yards per attempt since their bye, Jayden Daniels did struggle those first two games, just 6 and 6.6 yards per attempt. But I will say there may be a little bit of an edge here because in these first two playoff contests, he has run more. 13 and 16 carries. And although the Eagles did contain him, they did actually suffocate him in the first matchup. Just 7 carries for 18 yards. And their second one, he did get on the ground more, 9 carries for 81 yards. So I think I will be eyeing Jayden Daniels' rushing prop here, despite what the perception is about the Eagles stopping the run.
Interesting. So a couple different thoughts on that.
Yep.
One is that I'm wondering with the Commanders' defense, how much of their run defense numbers that you put out there is because they've been way more concerned with Baker Mayfield throwing the ball around to Mike Evans and Jared Goff throwing the ball around, whereas against the Eagles, they come out and try to make Jalen Hurts beat them, and they do a better job against the run because of it.
You know, they are an intuitive and intelligent defense, not surprising, under Dan Quinn, so much so that last week, a lot of my analysis was Jared Goff and Ben Johnson, and Jared Goff got hurt. Detroit suffered 3 in-game injuries that just ruined it, especially for a defense that every possession was so important for that team. But Washington came out and only played man coverage on 9% of their passing plays last week against Detroit. They changed up their defense entirely. And in the first matchup against Jalen Hurts, the one where he finished the game, Washington only played man coverage on 13% of their snaps as well. Whereas the second game when he leaves injured, they played man coverage in over half their snaps. Because I believe they think the way to limit the Eagles is by going into more zone and stopping plays over the top, perhaps even stuffing the box as they did whenever Jalen Hurts left the field that second game. Again, it's hard to stuff the box whenever Jalen Hurts is at least under center. So I don't think that's going to be the case here. They're not going to be allowed to do that, whereas they could do that with Kenny Pickett on the field. So Dan Quinn can change it up in an instant under our eyes just because he's that good of a play caller, and he will change things up on the fly in game as well.
All right, so before we get started, you need to know that playoff season's here. And the only thing better than game day predictions are the foods that come with them. Introducing Tums Fantasy Foodball Pool, brought to you by Tums, America's #1 antacid brand, and DraftKings. Each week leading up to the big game, turn football into foodball by building your best game day plate for a shot at winning a share of $40,000 in cash prizes. Inspired by game day bites and tailgate treats, join the Tums Foodball action during this playoff season's most heartburn-inducing time. Visit DraftKings.com/TumsFoodball between January 6th and February 9th to enter for free and select your game day plate before the start of each playoff round. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at DraftKings.com/TumsFoodball. When you feel the heat of the game, don't let heartburn keep you on the sidelines. Try Tums Chewy Bites with a tasty outer shell and soft center for fast relief of heartburn, acid ingestion, and upset stomach. Check out Tums Gummy Bites, featuring a soft and easy-to-chew format for fast relief of occasional heartburn, acid indigestion, sour stomach, and upset stomach. Both available at Amazon, Target, and other major retailers nationwide. And for more heartburn relief fun, be sure to follow Tums at Tums Official on Instagram and TikTok. So you already know that Smirnoff is the official vodka partner of the NFL and Super Bowl 59 because I've been telling you all season. What I like about Smirnoff is that you can get the world's #1 vodka without breaking the bank. Very affordable. This feeling is what the folks at Smirnoff call Smirnoff Extraordinary. They actually partnered with Complex, letting fans get their hands on some amazing items handpicked by celebrities, including NFL legend, Super Bowl champ Vernon Davis, for just $12.99. just like a bottle of Smirnoff. Head on over to SmirnoffDrops.com to check out upcoming drops and check out these Smirnoff extraordinary items. Go quick, they're not going to last long. Please drink responsibly, by the way. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer. May vary by state. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. So it's interesting. I'm trying to read this correctly on the prop bets for the rushing for Saquon Barkley. It looks like what do you have as the number here? I'm a little confused to be honest on DraftKings site.
No.
How to know the exact yardage. It looks like you can slide it based on rushing yards and then what your odds are.
I believe it's the highest rushing prop ever for a player. Last I looked, it was 131.5. Are you seeing that number as well?
Yeah, I think, this is interesting. This is a cool feature for DraftKings. At 120 plus, he's minus 145.
Yeah.
At 130 plus, he's plus 100. So they have the ability to be able to move it under. Now, those are the rush yards. On the over-under, okay, he's now at 126.5.
Okay.
Jaden Daniels is at 54.5. That sounds high, but I do think for the Commanders to win it, he probably has to get there.
Yes, and as I mentioned, running more as well. So Saquon Barkley, it's so high that I'm not necessarily interested. Can he get there? Of course he can. But that is a very, very high bar to climb. Now, again, as I talked about earlier, not just what he's done from scrimmage, but just in pure rushing yards, 149 and over 150 in his first two matchups against Washington. So can he get there? Of course he can. And as we saw against the Rams, more than capable of getting there on just 2 carries as well, as he continues to be the most explosive back in the league. It's just a very high bar to climb out the gates.
126.5 for Saquon, 54.5 for Jaden Daniels, 35.5 for Brian Robinson Jr., 29.5 for Jalen Hurts, 19.5 for Austin Eckler, 11.5 for Kenny Gainwell. Meanwhile, on the receiving props, we've got for Terry McLaurin, he's at 64.5. A.J. Brown, 61.5. That sounds a little high based on how A.J. Brown's been playing lately. Devontae Smith, 47.5. De'Ami Brown, 42.5. Dallas Goedert, 38.5. That actually seems low to me based on how Goddard's been playing. At first glance, and then Ertz is 31.5, and Eckler's 23.5, so is Zacchaeus. At first glance for me, the first ones that jump out to me would probably be the Goddard over and the A.J. Brown under from the Eagles side.
I agree with you. I'll quick hit all of these players because I do like quite a few of these props. Let's start with Dallas Goedert because since he's returned from injury, you just mentioned his lowly number in the mid-30s. He has recorded receiving yards 55, 47, and 56. He also only played, because remember he's been injured, he only played in the first matchup in Week 11 against Washington, and he had 5 catches for 61 yards. So I agree with you. That seems incredibly low, maybe even 15 to 18 yards off. So I do like Dallas Goedert over. I also like A.J. Brown under. There are ways it could go wrong. Again, Dan Quinn, as I already mentioned, will change his scheme to you. And so if Jalen Hurts is healthy, he could play a lot less man coverage. And that's really where A.J. Brown has strived this year. First of all, he struggled the last 3 games, to your point. Just 6 catches for 60 yards in that span. But more importantly, he has some massive splits against man coverage, and I get these numbers from Pro Football Focus, but in his first 2 games, or I should say against man coverage this year, he's been targeted on 38% of his routes compared to against zone coverage, just 22%. So that could allow Devonta Smith to slide as the better one-for-one DFS play, and probably Smith will be under-rostered compared to A.J. Brown. Now again, if Washington plays more man coverage, that's when we can expect A.J. Brown to probably spike some massive plays, especially because the target share, although the results have not been there, the target shares have been there. In the first 2 games against Washington, he commanded 32% and 60% of the Eagles' targets. And then last week against the Rams, again, you wouldn't know it, but it was still 7 targets on 20 throws. It was a 35% target share against the Rams, too. So Hurts is still showing he wants to go there. The results just haven't followed. Most of the time, that means the results will follow. But again, if the coverage is different, and if the field in DFS is going to play a lot of A.J. Brown, he's someone I certainly do not mind coming in underweight on. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you also touched on the Washington side of the ball. And so McLaurin in these first 2 games, 1 catch for 10 yards, 5 catches for 60 yards. Under that prop in both contests, and in those 2 matchups, I already mentioned A.J. Brown's target share, for example. McLaurin, 6% and 16.7%. So wasn't even being peppered targets. It has been different in the postseason, but I do wonder if this is a player where, although he's shown his ceiling, especially in terms of touchdowns over the second half of the season, I am still curious in my own lineups, and if I'm going to come in underweight on McLaurin. I do like Dommy Brown because since the playoffs, it's been Dommy Brown's show, honestly. 89 yards, 98 yards, back-to-back.
Crazy.
It's been incredible, especially since it was Olamide Zaccheaus who closed the year as like their number 2 receiver, and since that time, it's only been Dommy Brown in the playoffs.
All right, we're running out of time here, John. That's my fault. Let's get into the Bills and the Chiefs, the big one. What jumps out to you here?
We got 2 games, and we're still going to go long. So Patrick Mahomes, as an underdog, or in this case, favorite of less than a field goal in the playoffs, he is 7-0 against the spread. As we all know, the Bills have won their last 4 regular season matchups against the Chiefs, but when it comes to the playoffs, that's when Sean McDermott and Josh Allen have failed to get the job done most of the time on the last play or the last possession, as the Chiefs have won all 3 of those playoff contests. I think the interesting X's and O's matchup here, as we continue to talk about coverages and how these teams are going to play each other, is that Kansas City, when they played Buffalo in Week 11, they did deploy a much higher rate of zone coverage, because that's what Allen has struggled against this year. 73% of Steve Spagnuolo's snaps came from zone coverage, and against zone this year, Josh Allen, just 4 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. That's 4 of 28 touchdowns he's thrown this year against zone coverage, which is pretty insane. My favorite prop for Josh Allen, though, where he has not struggled to reach, is rushing against Spagnuolo, because now in each of these past 6 matchups, double-digit carries, and then also in Week 11, remember, 12 carries, 55 yards. He's gone for over 30 yards against Steve Spagnuolo in every single game. So I think it's going to have to be a spread-out target tree, and more importantly, Josh Allen continuing to get it done with his legs to win this matchup.
Love it. What about any of these receiving or rushing props? I'm looking at the receiving. Travis Kelce's at 70.5. Unbelievable that at 35 he still has the highest yardage in this game. Shakir's at 55.5. Any receiving props jump out to you before I look at the rushing ones?
DraftKings median last week really dropped the ball on Travis Kelce's prop. I understand they went by his regular season numbers, but again, we also discussed it last week how now all of 4 postseason appearances last year, over 70 receiving yards. He, of course, comes out and leads them with 117. Xavier Worthy, the only other receiver to get involved. So receiving prop is tougher. Khalil Shakir over is my favorite here. He had 12 targets in the first matchup. Like we said with Nico Collins, who finished a half a yard under his prop. We got there. Don't worry about the total, but we got there. But the Chiefs are still allowing the fewest yards per game to outside receivers, so I'm really worried about Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper. Where Buffalo will have success passing is through the slot, through Shakir.
Yep, and Dalton Kincaid trying to hit the middle of the field, no question. Fantastic job, John. I can't believe it. We probably could have gone on and on.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that. I thought, we only have 2 games. Check him out. Not Jay Daigle. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. I'm stuffed. We're done.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.